Ladies and gentlemen, for the ones in attendance and the millions watching around the world, the Big Bag Network presents the High Flying Podcast.
This is the High Flying Podcast where we be drop kicking it with the boys, so make sure to body slam that like, share, and subscribe button. I am your host, Biggie Bag Jeanie, back with another video, and today we doing another one of my favorites. I don't know, this season's kind of, it's kind of missing more than hitting. But I don't know, let me know what you guys think, man. You guys been subscribing, you guys been commenting. You guys been letting me know what y'all been thinking. And we're just going to get straight into this one, man. So, remember to tell a friend to subscribe and to tune in every week when we do these, man. So, you're tuned into the High Flying Podcast with your host, Biggie Bag Jeanie. And I'm going to let you know right now, I have no idea who this guy is. Sorry, I'm watching this for the first time with you guys, so let it rip, baby.
Or what about wrestling here?
I find the wrestling here is a lot rougher, kicking, punching, a lot more, I guess you call it dirtiness,
Adams with that super kick, that caught him, that's his move.
A judo champion who came to America with the dream of becoming a star of the squared circle, Chris Adams captured lightning in a bottle.
The stardom that Chris Adams got at World Class Championship Wrestling, because you got to realize, on that level that Chris Adams was here, you were a big star everywhere.
The gentleman from England, Chris Adams.
Chris was the perfect gentleman over there.
With his athleticism, determination, and charm, Chris had all the tools to become a megastar.
My dad in Dallas was an A-list celebrity. It was impossible to go anywhere.
He had this thing with Steve Austin where he trained Steve. Steve was going to make it in wrestling.
But behind the curtain, Chris's most challenging opponent was himself.
Life got in his way a lot of times. Sometimes Chris probably got in his own way.
When he get a drink, man, Chris just turned into a different person, man. He didn't give a damn about nobody or nothing.
Basically looking for you to say something that upsets him.
He was definitely a Jekyll and Hyde.
From Jekyll to Hyde.
I'm telling you, it was Jekyll and Hyde.
But alcohol brought out something that destroyed him.
One man with two personalities on a downward spiral.
Chris got drunk, got belligerent. He just started beating the hell out of him.
There was a gun.
We were friends. I was best man at his wedding. It was a bad situation. It was a nightmare.
That dude looked like Chris. That dude looked like the Miz's dad. That's one. And then two, you are tuned into the High Flying Podcast. So remember to hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Chris Adams, the gentleman.
Weighing in at 233 pounds from England, welcome Chris Adams.
Okay, so these were in a storage unit that my dad had, and this is just an example.
It's so amazing that you kept this stuff.
I know, I keep everything. It was hard. It was still hard. I still miss him. I still think about my dad every day. I'm Jade Adams, daughter of gentleman Chris Adams. When he was traveling, he would always write me notes, letters, always send me a birthday card, pour his heart out in it. Dear Jade, wow, how time flies. I miss you so much, Munchkin. Yep, you're still my Munchkin, even though you're nearly 14 and a beautiful young woman already. It seems that I have always been struggling trying to make it, and that before you know it, half of my life is over and I've missed out on so much. I really want to see you more often. Family is so important. I feel so guilty now. I think of all the things I have done in the past that have hurt people, and often grieve about them every day. Anyway, I thought it was time that I told you my true feelings, and I hope that you'll be able to forgive me. Love, Daddy. He didn't want these demons as much as none of us wanted them for him. I just think they ended up kind of catching up to him, but he was a great person and a loving person. And, you know, he's not here to defend himself, so I want to do that for him.
Long before anyone could imagine that his story would end in tragedy, Chris Adams was a spectacular performer who seemed destined for greatness.
The American heavyweight champion, the gentleman from England, Chris Adams.
I know Chris Adams very well. He wanted to be the best he could be. I had to admire that about him. I'm Kevin Von Erich. I've been in the wrestling business for longer than I can count. Chris was one of the toughest guys I've ever known. He was really a master. He knew what he was doing in the ring. Chris had a special finishing move, was a super kick, and he kicked like a horse.
A super kick, and Kevin Von Erich is out on the floor.
He invented his finishing move because when we discussed the match and how to get him over when he got here, he said, well, my finish is a super kick. You'll know it when you see it. When he threw the super kick for the finish, we were like, whoa! Hi, my name's David Manning, and I was a promoter, a booker, and a referee for World Class Championship Wrestling.
Last thing I do, I'm gonna take $500. $500. You don't get my face on the record. Get out.
When Chris did the super kick, as he would kick, he would also had a way where you really couldn't see it, but he would slap his leg, and it literally sounded like he just tore the opponent's head off.
And it came back with his own. There's a super kick. A tremendous super kick by Chris Adams.
That was it. From there on, he was just climbing the mountain here at World Class.
When Chris Adams come in from England, you know, I had them colors from over there in England and shit, man. Oh, they loved him. Oh, yeah, for sure.
I tell you what the situation is, brother. Chris Adams then went goofy.
I'm Iceman, and I used to wrestle with Chris Adams. Chris didn't give a damn. He was just tough, man. That dude brought that super kick, man, was unbelievable.
There's a super kick.
And he could do anything in that ring. He was a performer.
Do you know anything about his judo background?
I knew his brother had won judos in the Olympics.
My brother and I, we were both introduced into judo very early age, and it was very much our life. I'm Neil Adams, Chris's younger brother, 2 times Olympic silver medalist in judo. Judo has been the backbone of our family for a very long time. And this is where my career as a professional wrestler really first began too, because I had 14 years of hardcore judo. Chris was a great fighter. Whatever he did, he wanted to be the best, you know, and I think he got to a stage where he knew he couldn't go all the way to Olympics and World Championships, and so he kind of changed direction. World of Sport Wrestling, which was the British wrestling group, they approached him, and that's how it started. Well, of course, it was Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks, Mick McManus, and then black belt Chris Adams came into the fold.
I ask you to welcome that very popular young star, black belt Chris Adams.
His good looks helped, but also he was a showman, and he could charm anybody. he could really turn it on.
I was 19 and my friend and I was at the bar, and he just walked straight up to me and said, "My name is Chris Adams." My name is Jeanie Clark. I was the girlfriend of Chris Adams. I thought a very good-looking guy, had really cute dimples. I said to my friend, he looks a little bit like Paul McCartney, and gave me his phone number. I think I'd moved in with him within a month.
Eager to glamorize and elevate his TV image, Chris recruits Jeanie to join his act.
He came up with an idea that I would be his second. I was the girl that would come in between the rounds, and as in boxing, don't think that it had been done in wrestling before. I did think he may make a good star, but only up to a certain degree.
Knowing his fame in England has a ceiling, Chris and Jeanie packed their bags for the City of Angels.
After arriving in Los Angeles, about 2 or 3 months later, I became pregnant. I loved it, and I remember sunbathing a lot. Chris and I just sitting on the beach, just enjoying the sunshine. And then I remember Chris' head turning a little bit. Beautiful girls on the beach. They were tanned in bikinis. You didn't see that in the UK. I knew he was looking at other women. Probably my first red flags that something was going wrong, but because I was pregnant, I felt not good enough.
Settling into their new life, Jeanie learns that she is pregnant. And with Chris traveling for work, she's often left alone in Redondo Beach.
I didn't see a lot of Chris. It was very difficult. I was very pregnant, and we didn't actually have a lot of money at that time. So Chris, he went to Mexico quite some time. I went back alone to the UK to give birth to Jade. And then finally Chris came back to the UK. He was happy, but he said we were going to go back, and that was the way it was.
With the family back together, Chris is eager to return to the US. But for Jeanie, the thrill is gone.
He started to stop coming home. I think he was seeing a lot of different women. But I do recall the last straw was over New Year's, because he said, you can't come with me, but if you cook and get champagne, we'll have a meal together when I get back. And I did do that, and give me a sec. He came home 3 days later. I did not want to share my boyfriend, and the relationship was over. But we remained amicable after the fact as friends, but I did not want a romantic relationship. Yeah, he just said he wanted me to come to Dallas, and we both looked after Jade.
My mom and my dad were separated when I was a baby. So when I lived in Dallas, I saw him every weekend.
Welcome to World Class Championship Wrestling. You're going to meet the newcomer from England, the former British Empire champion, Chris Adams. Very glad to meet you, Chris. Welcome to Texas.
Thank you. Well, at last I've made it to Texas.
Based out of Dallas, Texas, World Class Championship Wrestling is one of the hottest and most popular wrestling companies in the world.
When Chris came to the market here in Dallas, we had Iceman King Parsons here. We had 3 Von Erichs. We had the fabulous Freebirds. So you had to be exceptional to be able to draw the crowd and everything else to take one of those slots.
It was on par with the Dallas Cowboys, and people loved it. It was incredible in this area especially. Hi, I'm James Beard. I've been in the wrestling business about 40 years.
It's not an easy job, as you can tell. It gets kind of rough in there sometimes.
Up and over.
Chris was incredibly athletic and can move like a cat. The kip-ups and the dives and the super kick.
There's a super kick.
He was on par with the Von Erichs, really. If you're on par with the Von Erichs, you're pretty much godlike.
A tremendous roar for Chris Adams, a gentleman from England.
He had the charisma, he had the looks, and he was a good worker. But there was a way with Chris Adams that he could be from Jekyll to Hyde.
Now, when you people see this, I just want you to see the fire and the wildness in my eyes.
I'm going to tell you, professional wrestlers are usually ex-bullies from high school. Chris was like that, too. In Dallas, when he first got in the territory, a guy would drive with him to the towns, and the guy got lost once. And we have a rule in World Class, you're at the show an hour before the show. If you're not there, then there's problems. Well, Chris was late. He blamed it on the guy that was driving him. When you pissed Chris off, his eyes would shine red. Like a light was on in there. And he choked him almost to death. Chris almost killed him. He goes, well, Kev, some people are hardliners. Kev, I don't want him to do it again. That's Chris without being drunk. It scared a lot of people. Chris gave off an aura, like this guy's out of control. You know, he may hurt other people too.
You already know what time it is. I'm already here fucking up this fucking race. It's good. This episode is getting good. What you think? Subscribe, like, comment. Let me know. Dark Side of the Ring.
He is Chris Adams.
Now established in world class, Chris's ambition is to be the star of the show. But in a company crowded with fan favorites, the path to stardom is to become a standout villain.
Any territory you go in to where you got the promoter's sons, they're always going to be the top. Usually every week, the main event was always one of the Von Erichs taking on whoever the heel was. We tied Chris up with Gino Hernandez. Gino and Chris actually had discussed it themselves. This was a way to shift to be the main event.
Chris Adams and Kevin Von Erich ready to go against Jake the Snake Roberts and Gino Hernandez.
It was a tag team match, and then Chris turned on Kevin during the match.
A strange turn of events.
The next thing I know, he hit Billy, and then Chris hit him with a super kick out of nowhere.
They turned Chris bad. Got with Gino, you know, it was a hell of a little team together, man.
We're the dynamic duo. 1985 is going to be our year.
They were good-looking guys, great chemistry. They both were great on the mic.
Yeah, well, we're real bad, right? We're bad to the bone.
And they'd come to the ring with the strut. They had a way to antagonize the fans. They were bad to the bone.
Chris and Gino, what a team that was. We decided we want to make the best wrestling show we can. It was a feeling of, let's beat what we did last time. Let's go wild out there.
The business was booming. Crowd, sell out. Are you listening to me, man? Everywhere. They turned over 3,000 people away, man.
He was happier because he was making more money. He had a red Corvette, nice condo.
Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez. See you guys.
Well, my dad lived on Lover's Lane, and Gino Hernandez lived in the same apartment complex. Everywhere they went, there was always people following them, you know, wanting to have a fun time.
Teaming with Gino Hernandez has elevated Chris to the main event scene in world class. But along with the money and the fame, stardom introduces Chris to a new world of dangers and temptations.
San Antonio, after the matches, we all went to the Best Western up on the 3rd floor, man. They had 3 rooms. They had 2 tables in each room. I'm talking about bricks of cocaine, weed. Then the next room, they had pills and everything. They had a pyramid bill, Jack Daniels for the Freebirds. Then they had my champagne over there, you know what I'm saying? They said, and then they had a cop on each door. I said, how the they doing all this dope, and then these police out there, they getting the police officers $1,000 a piece, man. Police just turn their head, man. And women, unbelievable. You get more pussy on accident than you did on purpose. You hear me? I'm just keeping it real, man.
Chris and Gino outside of the ring was always a dangerous situation. It'd be like you lit a fuse. The question is, when's it going to explode?
I mean, we're into sports cars, we're into fast cars, faster women, and fast life.
I'm glad that they were good friends, but obviously, you know, it's sad, isn't it? You know, what happened?
Hernandez, whose real name is Charles Wolf, was only 29 years old. The popular wrestling star's badly decomposed body was discovered late last night at his home in Highland Park. He had apparently been dead for several days.
On February 2nd, 1986, Gino Hernandez dies of what was ruled as a cocaine overdose.
It blew me away, man. That blew me the away.
What has happened is a tragedy. He was a great competitor, one-time American heavyweight champion, several times Texas heavyweight champion.
When you talk about someone like Gino Hernandez, man who lived the life in the fast lane and loved the life in the fast lane.
In the wake of Gino's death, Chris's use of drugs and alcohol begins to worry those closest to him.
Sometimes he'd phone me and I'd know if he'd had too much to drink. I really worried about that.
I say, you need to calm down if you can, brother.
Chris was Chris until alcohol got involved. And then it was Chris the Demon, and he would get mean, and he could get vicious. In Israel, it happened, and I'll never forget, I get a call from the local promoter there, and he's like, you got to get over here, you got to get over here. Chris got in an argument with the bartender, and he super kicked him in the side of the head, and it knocked his eye out. I mean, his eye literally came out.
Despite the escalation of Chris's drinking and bar fighting, he strikes up a new relationship with a woman named Toni Collins.
There was always a bar we would stop at in Fort Worth that gave us free alcohol for the publicity if we'd all come by there after the matches. And that's actually where he met Toni. One thing led to the other, and they ended up getting married. It was fast. He loved her. I know that for a fact.
Toni was my brother Chris's mom. I loved her. She was like a mother to me. She was absolutely amazing.
Next to kick too. Here we go. Oh. Hey.
I think my dad met his match with her for sure. My name is Chris Adams Jr. I am Gentleman Chris Adams' son. My dad always said that she was a 6'4", 400-pound man trapped in the body of a 5'2", 100-pound woman. She was very strong-willed, she was very fierce, but also very kind and very loving.
Within a year of meeting, Chris and Toni get married in Hawaii, but any hope that marriage might soften Chris's temper is quickly lost.
We had a show in the Caribbean, and we were headed back into some kind of equipment malfunction on the plane. There was a delay for hours and hours.
But ain't no air condition or nothing. It's just hot. People sweating and shit, so they serving drinks.
Chris drank until they took off. Now they're headed back. They're in the air. And after about 2 more drinks, they cut him off. And they told him he couldn't have any more alcohol.
I'm in my seat asleep, and the stewardess comes back and shakes me awake and says, please get your friend. He's pissed off.
And Chris Adams already lit now. He said, get out the way, bitch. And when he said bitch, she said, wow, and he slapped him. And he slapped her back. And the airplane pilot reached in there and grabbed him and shook him and said, what's your problem?
First of all, why the fuck did you put your hands on me, bitch? And then third of all, why you motherfuckers is... Listen, man. I mean, he wasn't all the way wrong. He was wrong. But she touched him first, so...
Chris's eyes were that red light goes on his eye. Chris Adams had that co-pilot by the lapels of his coat, and his feet weren't even touching the ground. And Chris said, feel the power, and was pumping his head into his face, and blood everywhere.
If he wouldn't have had the alcohol, it would have never happened. It's just that Chris was just not Chris Adams anymore once he got intoxicated. Sometimes something like that's a wake-up call, and Chris just continued to have problems.
Hey, man, I know so many people like that, man, where it's just like there's the coolest motherfuckers in the world, the most genuine motherfuckers in the world, and then all of a sudden they start drinking or whatever, they get a little whatever in their system, and they just turn into a complete different person. But all for realness, bro, that stewardess deserves to get punched and slapped. I'm sorry. Fuck that. She touched him first. You know me, I don't give a fuck if he called you a bitch at motherfucking 365,000 motherfucking square feet in the air. Do not put your motherfucking hands on no man. And the fact that he motherfucking picked that fucking guy up and said, feel the power! And then headbutted him. He's goated, bro. Let's go. Subscribe to the fucking channel, High Flying Podcast. Let's go!
Arrested for headbutting a pilot on a flight back from Puerto Rico, Chris Adams has put the future of his career in jeopardy.
It's one of those kind of situations that when you start to sober up, you realize that the magnitude of your mistake and what you've done wrong.
And that was bad publicity for World Class. It didn't go away. Chris ended up getting some prison time.
I think that hurt his reputation a lot once fans started finding out a little bit about that.
This made national news. A wrestler headbutts pilot. We had a meeting at the office, and he told Chris, I don't know what's going on with you, but you got to straighten up.
He brought shame on us, no doubt. That's terrible.
And I know that everybody enjoys a drink. Everybody likes that last drink. But you see, that's where the problem begins.
I think he realized that you've got to change. You know, that I've got to get a hold of this and I've got to change it.
With his dangerous reputation now hindering his career, Chris begins looking for new ways to capitalize on his fame.
Chris was always kind of industrious and looking for a way to make something outside the business. He used, I guess, that celebrity to kind of draw people into it.
Hello, everybody. This is Gentleman Chris Adams here again to give you another update on my own personalized coaching class. We'll put you on your own course that lasts anything from 9 months to 2 years.
I talked him into starting the wrestling school at the Sports Home in the day. Hello, I'm Tom Lance, and I was very good friends with Chris Adams. One of our first students was, Steve Williams, who became Stone Cold Steve Austin.
The name is not Steve Williams. It's Austin. Steve Austin. And don't forget it.
What Chris did with Steve, was to teach him some of the basics, some of the fundamental principles of combat.
You know the story on these two. Steve Austin, an individual off the street who came into the USWA Wrestling Academy. Chris immediately recognized the promise in this young blonde, helped him develop his body a little further.
I give Chris credit. He did train Steve.
While training Steve Austin, Chris introduces his new friend to an old flame.
I want to bring down the sexiest girl in America, the gorgeous and lovely Jeanie.
What relationship does he have with you?
That's none of your business, Mark.
What ended up happening was my dad put my mom and Steve together to do like an angle, and then they started dating.
With his ex-girlfriend now dating his top student, Chris concocts an angle designed to put him back in the main event.
Jeanie comes in as the ex, and she's teaming with Steve Austin, and that turned into a pretty hot angle.
You're jealous of Steve because he is a real man.
My mom, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepdad.
Right there, Stone Cold is a good-looking guy. But back in the day, that motherfucker was ugly. God damn.
All did an angle together, wrestling, and it was wild. It was not your traditional job.
Yeah, and the fact that motherfucker, you got your motherfucking meds on your ex-bitch and your new bitch, and you doing this whole family, and my student gotta be, bro, that's weird, bro. This whole, it's not dark, it's weird, my nigga. It just sounds like a dude that was really living a hardcore cesspool.
For your parents.
And working with Chris, of course, I went through his school and I was his protege. Dude, I'd only been in the business for a few months. And I always remember, he was in control of our angle. Nobody was influencing what we did. Chris had the bottom line on that. So he was a very, very smart guy.
But I'll tell you what, Austin, there's not room enough in Texas for you and I.
To be honest, Chris directed every single part of that for me. He'd give me every line. I was to watch Joan Collins on Dynasty.
Mourning the baby that she couldn't have. That is it, isn't it? Oh, you miserable bitch.
And that was the idea of the character.
Just remember, he is thinking about me.
Only in wrestling could you do something like that. And when the women wrestled, it was sometimes an all-out cat fight.
Jeanie goes after Tony.
Pulling your hair, scratching eyes, slapping each other across the face, getting the kendo sticks, slapping each other. Anything that they could do to hurt each other, it was nasty sometimes.
Well, neither one of us knew how to wrestle. The interviews were my favorite part.
I am far superior to you. I have royal blood in my veins. She was born on a shrimp boat. She's jealous of me.
She said, I can't believe you said that about me. And I said, Chris told me to say it.
I'm sick and tired of you, girl.
If you both don't back off, you're going to end up getting hurt.
And even when you get along, there's going to be some kind of issues there that just don't jibe together.
You were my #1 student. You even wear my boots to the ring.
There were some issues with Steve and Chris. I think there was a little bit of Chris seeing this guy that's coming along, he's really going to be a star. And I think Steve felt like he was probably being held back a little bit. There was some real life drama going on there, too.
He is accompanied by...
Oh, shit.
the WCW World Television Champion, Stunning Steve Austin.
I think he was jealous that we went to WCW. I suppose he was jealous of the money.
As Steve and Jeanie make the jump to the big time with WCW, Chris, frustrated, turns back to the bottle to nurse his bruised ego.
When he was sober, he was, great. He was dad. He was awesome. He was there. When he started drinking, it just kind of changed. I know my mom kind of told me that that's what it was like for her. When I was older, my mom would tell me they had an up and down roller coaster relationship. I think towards the beginning it was very good, and I think about halfway through it got pretty rocky.
Man, just screaming and yelling, it was intense, especially if they'd both have been drinking or something like that. Chris had told me one time they're headed home from a show, they're in his Corvette. Tony's driving, Chris in the passenger seat, and the little boy, Chris Jr., was in the back. And he said that some reason they were arguing and she had stopped on the interstate, and a semi was coming. And luckily, it went around them and didn't hit them. If it would have hit them, none of them probably would have lived. And it angered him so much that that's when he got physical with her. And it beat her up, and messed her up. She had to have some facial surgery. I ain't cool with that shit.
But I remember it wasn't until I was much older and she had shown me some of the pictures of her where that abuse had happened and she was in the hospital for a while. I couldn't believe it.
And I say all these good things about Chris, but that's heinous. That's terrible. It's disgusting. I'm just now realizing how much stuff there was. I didn't put it all together, I guess. That's terrible.
Y'all niggas knew. All you motherfuckers knew. And then they gave Chris Brown all the shit that they gave him, man. That's just wild, though. I mean, she kind of deserved a smack, but I don't think facial. So I don't know if you gotta understand he was already intoxicated. Then he's probably mad because you put my kid's life in jeopardy because of the bullshit. So I mean, I'm not saying beat the bitch down to a pole and facial surgery, but there's consequences for putting the kid involved. You know what I mean? That's just me, though. I don't know.
The horrific attack on Tony is a shocking new low for Chris Adams. But as he continues to struggle, his descent to the bottom will only get worse.
She knew that it wasn't right for her, that kind of lifestyle. I think she knew she needed to get out. She said, I had everything that I had with your dad. I had the big house. I had a Corvette. Everything that anybody could ever want. But I just felt so empty inside.
Chris's reputation follows him to his next company, the struggling Global Wrestling Federation.
After World Class, and then Global came in, and that was a pretty good run.
Chris Adams against Rod the Bod.
Rod Price, he and Chris were battling for the GWF title. Rod had long blonde hair, and it was starting to thin out, so he ended up getting a weave put in. Somehow they kind of sewed it in up there. I don't know how it was all done, but anyway, Chris knew about it. We all knew about it, and it was kind of off limits. Don't pull the hair. Well, during this match, Chris, because I think he probably thought it would just come right off, and he jerked on it, and instead of coming off, it ripped off. And blood went everywhere. I've never seen so much blood in a ring in my life. It just covered. I mean, he didn't even finish the match. He just left the ring. We had to take him to the emergency room. I'm almost sure it was like 200 stitches to get that all straightened out.
Chris did it on purpose?
Yeah, he did it on purpose, yeah.
In 1997, Chris finally gets the call from WCW, at the time the most popular wrestling company in America.
I think when he got that opportunity to go to WCW, he was thinking, yeah, this is going to be the thing that restarts my career. And it didn't happen.
WCW was a second chance for Chris, but the matches I saw, it almost looked like they were using him to get their next star over.
Watch out. Uh-oh. Chuck. gentleman Chris Adams was interrupting a cigarette break, and he paid for it.
He was unhappy that he'd gone to WCW and was being used as a jobber.
1, 2, 3.
I remember him saying that he was working harder. You know, he worked hard and he was getting tired.
I think he was getting discouraged about the whole thing, getting beat every night.
I don't see how it couldn't affect someone being at the top like that, and then very quickly, you know, if you don't stay on top of it, you don't change your angle, things are changing, it's going to happen. Your career is going to dwindle.
I can remember him talking about, I know I'm better than this guy and that guy, and he wasn't lying. He probably was. But you know, wrestling's not always fair. Other things were going on that were working against him.
Why'd he get fired? A few too many drinks and got a DWI, and they let him go.
He was always struggling with finances. His status had diminished to a point to where he wasn't the guy you wanted to go to. He was getting a little older, harder to stay in shape, and people just weren't coming to him like they used to.
He got into some other stuff besides alcohol, got into GHB real bad. Basically, when you do GHB, if you do too much of it, you're just comatose. I don't know why anybody would want to do it.
GHB was pretty popular in the day. Everybody kind of done it. It started off for bodybuilders, if you're sore and stuff, to help you work out, but I know it'll help you relax, and some also would call it the love drug, too.
There's a fine line of how much you can take, and it's a very dangerous drug.
Broke, unable to find work, and desperate for somewhere to live, Chris moves in with a friend of Tom Lance, a local wrestling fan known as Boo Ray.
Chris was going through some tough times. Boo Ray had his place. Chris was needing kind of somewhere to stay and all that, so I introduced him. Wasn't for Boo Ray, I don't know what Chris would have done. Super good guy, cared about people, went above and beyond. That's why he was helping Chris. Chris was lost.
But I loved Chris, you know, he's my friend. Chris was really a nice guy. He was witty, he was fun, you know, to be around. I'm Boo Ray, and Chris and I were good friends.
Is that not the Mrs. Dad? That looks just like the Mrs. Dad, bro. That's crazy.
He was a good enough friend that I trusted him in my house. He was really a delightful guy. We'd invite people over and cook out by the swimming pool, and we were having a good time.
Well, I mean, they seem to be getting along great, him and Boo Ray. Boo Ray paid the bills.
He had no money. He might work one little show here and there, and it was hard for me to take money from somebody that hadn't made money in, 3 months. I was happy to help him, but also inside I was feeling I was being used.
While living with Boo Ray, Chris meets a young woman named Linda.
He was in love with Linda. I know he was in love with her. They didn't know each other all that long either, but they were, oh God, they got along so good. She was an angel, so witty and funny. She was just perfect.
She seemed like very mature, very stable. I can see how Chris would find some solace in that, because I think that's what he was seeking.
On the night of April 22nd, 2000, after dating for just a few weeks, Chris brings Linda back to Boo Ray's house to keep the party going into the early morning.
They'd been out all night. They were having a good time dancing, And I said, you know what, 3's a crowd. I'm going to bed. Chris told me this the next day, that they went on and got that little bit of GHB and got 2 small glasses and just split it. I had warned Chris way before this that I did not want that GHB in the house. I didn't care what else he had. That was his business. The silence, I guess, woke me up at about 4 a.m. I came in and they were both passed out. Chris was slumped over a chair and Linda was on her back on the floor. I was trying to wake him up and I couldn't wake him up. Linda's lungs started kind of wheezing, and that's when I called Tom.
He was scared to call 911 because he knew Chris would get pissed. And I was like, I don't give a call 911. They're not breathing.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy, bro. Dark side of the ring. Whew. Subscribe to the channel, man. Hotline Podcast. Your boy Biggie Bag Johnny. You already know what time it is, baby. This one is a doozy.
Boo Ray wakes up in the middle of the night to find Chris Adams and Chris's girlfriend Linda unresponsive.
The paramedics got there, and I stayed on the phone with him, me and my wife. They're trying to wake Chris, and then they're working on Linda, and I hear them say flatline. And I was like, Boo Ray, did I just hear flatline? Because we know what that meant.
It's not the easiest thing in the world to talk about this. But from seeing somebody that was just...
I don't know, for some reason I felt like it was something different, and this dude is lying about it, and there's something more to that story, because he didn't want to call the cops, because he was going to be mad, and what? Yeah, that's weird, bro. This dude seems weird.
One of the sweetest people in the world die right in front of your arms, you know?
Is it Chris's fault that this happened?
In my opinion, yes. He was careless.
I never saw him use drugs. He just told me the truth that he gave Linda, too much of this GHB and she died, and he was absolutely devastated.
Several months later, they charged him with manslaughter. I think he definitely felt responsible for it. He was torn up about it. I mean, he legitimately torn down about what happened.
After Linda died, he was going through a lot of ups and downs. He had threatened suicide and this and that, drinking a lot.
His drinking had spiraled really bad. That would have been self-medicating.
I think he was just totally freaking out, wondering if he was going to get out of the manslaughter charge and going from making money to no money. He was miserable inside.
I kind of got away from him, really didn't want to be involved that much. And there's times when you wonder if maybe if I'd reached out, maybe I could have talked to him. I don't know. I doubt it, really, to be honest with you. I don't know how you can talk somebody out of that hole. I really don't.
It's, very obvious my dad had an issue with, drugs and alcohol. And I just wish that someone had stepped in and said, hey, Chris, you're doing too much. I think if it had happened today, I think he might still be alive.
October the 7th. It was at my mother's house. And Chris had called me earlier that morning and told me he was all bummed out. I just said, why don't you come on over? Finally, about 7, he showed up, and I had brandy. Of course, we had beer. And I'm still not sure what set him off. I must have said, Chris, could you hold it down a little bit? My mother's trying to sleep. But anyway, boy, that's when he went berserk. I mean, just like boom, light switch. And he come at me with that post. I had a 4-post bed, and he broke the post off and come at me with it. I grabbed the post, which cracked my index finger, and then he put me in a sleeper hold. And then here we go across the room. He pushed me on a bed, and he just started gouging my eyes out. And he started biting me. He bit me on the face several times, and then on the neck. He had me pinned down and was choking me. He just kept getting stronger. His eyes seemed to glow. I thought I was gonna die. I kept a gun on my end table. I put the gun as quick as I could to his shoulder. The only thing I could do was pull the trigger.
motherfucker sound coach to me. It sounds coach to me, my guy. It sounds like you was coached to me. In my opinion, I believe that the nigga had something to do with it. Chris wanted the nigga to come forward, like, yo, bro, let him know that you was in this too. Dude was probably on some like, nah, I can't let that happen. They probably had a tussle, and then bam, boom. That's just my opinion, but that whole conversation just sound coached, like a lawyer told you what to say. But that's on me. That's just me.
He went crazy. It was like he turned into an animal. And when I pulled the trigger, he jumped a little bit, enough to hit his heart. I was wanting to maybe wound him to where he'd, get some sense. It's hard to make decisions like that when you don't have much time to make them. He would have killed me. I called 911, asked them to please get here quick. It was bad.
I remember that day very vividly. I was in school. My mom came to pick me up. We get home, and I remember her getting down on her knees in front of me. Honey, I'm so sorry to say, but your dad's dead. And I didn't feel anything at the moment because I thought, no way.
I get a call from my wife, and she could hardly draw breath, and then said he's gone. Chris had been shot. And I was, just to say I was stunned as an understatement. I just sat down on the floor and I was in total shock.
I was 19 when my dad died. It was like very surreal. I mean, and that was the first experience I'd ever really had with like a profound grief because it was my dad. So it was really tough. Like it took me a really long time to cope with it.
The funeral, it was packed. You had ex-wrestlers that were there. You had family that came all the way from the UK.
And yeah, there was like people standing out the back because there were so many wrestling fans there. It was a nice tribute.
He had affected so many people's lives, and a lot of it was for the better. And I just remember being very solemn when I was there, but hearing a lot of the words that people said were really cool. A lot of people loved him.
I pulled the trigger. I'm sad, but I wouldn't be sitting here right now had I not. I had to go in front of the grand jury. They said, it's over. What you did was an act of self-defense.
It was almost like him or me. I feel like we really had no choice. I don't think he wanted to roll the dice.
Something happened in there. Do I believe him that it was self-defense? No, I don't.
Me neither.
A very sad and tragic accident between two very good friends. Alcohol being the common denominator, and Bure being a victim as well because he has to live with it. So forgiveness has to be the best way forward.
When you're close to somebody like that and then something crazy like that happens, whether he's trying to kill you or not, it's still taking another person's life away from them. That's not a good feeling. It's awful. It's awful.
The thing about Chris that I'll never forget is just how incredibly talented he was. And it's a shame that talent didn't lead to a longer and more fulfilled life. To me, it's just a sad story.
I'll remember Chris Adams as a great wrestler in the ring, a great performer, a great athlete. But when it comes outside of the ring, when the alcohol would kick in, it was almost like he was looking for that edge of why he could get mad at you. And he was a person that once he realized he had an alcohol problem, he didn't choose to solve it.
What a dichotomy. He had a great side and he had a terrible, ugly side that really outweighed the good. But I remember the good.
I want my dad to be remembered as an amazing athlete who worked really hard and as a loving father to his kids, because I think his kids were everything to him. just wish he could be here to see how we all ended up. I think he'd be proud of us. I think he'd be proud of my brother particularly.
1, 2, 3.
There was so much more to my dad than just the wild, crazy party side. There was a reason why people called him the gentleman. There's a reason why my friends over in England would always say he could sing the birds out of the trees. You know, he was very charming. He was very loving. He was a kind father. I want people to remember him as that person, as not just Gentleman Chris Adams, but as Chris Adams.
All of these motherfucking shows is making me want to call my dad. I actually got off the phone with him right before I started this. So there you have it, man. This one was really dark, but you know, it is what it is. So appreciate all you guys. Remember to subscribe to the channel and remember to wear deodorant. Holla at your grandmother.
The Big Bag Network presents the High Flying Podcast, where we dive off the top higher than RVD and Matt Riddle's love child, with your host Biggie Bag Johnny. Subscribe to the channel and stay up to date on all things wrestling related. So grab your belts and bongs, bad bitches with thongs, and watch whatever episode that you want to put on. It's the High Flying Podcast with Biggie Bag Johnny. Let's go.
This is the Deathmatch King, Matt Cardona. You're listening to the High Flying Podcast with Big Bad Johnny. They said they were going to pay me. Where's my fucking money?
What's up, guys? You see Brian Cage. Who needs to have the High Flying Podcast with Big Bad Johnny. Apple of the Dawn. I got it right this time. So everybody who missed the first couple blocks, you didn't just did. All right, check it out. High Flying Podcast. Who better?
Thank you for all the doors that you opened up, so you guys can bust through the window, you know, and I always appreciate it.
When in 2004, Eddie Guerrero came up to me and thanked me for opening up the door for the Hispanics in WWF. That meant a lot to me when he told me that.
Absolutely.